Tonight, 2 hikers are now confirmed dead after a massive rockfall in Banff National Park. A 70-year-old retiree among those killed in the chaos.
So sudden and so shocking.
Why the popular trail may have been especially at risk. More than a week into the Israel-Iran war, still no diplomatic breakthrough.
This is a perilous moment.
Why Iran's retaliation could trigger global chaos. And the struggle to find summer work.
It's hard. It's hard.
Why it's a tough time to get that first job.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. Parks Canada and the RCMP have confirmed more grim news from Banff National Park. Rescue workers have found the body of a second person killed in Thursday's rockfall. And we now know the name of the first victim discovered. Yuda Hinrichs was 70 years old, a retired professor of the University of Alberta. 3 injured people were taken to hospital after the sudden collapse in a popular hiking area. In a moment, we'll look at how rockfalls happen and how often, but let's start with Helen Pike in Banff National Park. Helen, Park Canada officials and the RCMP spoke earlier this afternoon. What's the latest?
Erica, they say that the search is over. They don't think that anyone else is missing. But for the people who were here Thursday, who heard that crack and saw that cascading rock, the memory is vivid.
I heard just kind of a cracking sound, and I knew immediately what that sound was rock.
Ellie Jackson describes the moment just before a devastating rockfall. She was one of 16 people on the Bow Glacier Falls Trail when disaster struck. 2 hikers were killed and 3 people were taken to hospital.
Sadly, this extremely rare event appears to have been neither preventable nor predictable.
But officials say the search and recovery now over was treacherous.
The debris was incredibly unstable, and there were still parts of the cliff that were concerning. So really looking at minimizing responder exposure, but looking very carefully for any other individuals.
The first of the victims to be publicly identified was 70-year-old Yuda Hinrichs, a well-known occupational therapist who retired from the University of Alberta just last year.
So sudden and so shocking. And again, she had just recently retired and was able to find some extra time now to get outside and really enjoy herself. So this is a shock to all of us.
The body of the other hiker killed was found early Friday morning. Officials say a dog picked up a scent late Thursday, but there was too much risk, not enough daylight left to follow it. In an area where there's no cell service, Ellie Jackson is glad several of the hikers had come prepared.
I had a lot of equipment with me. I have my emergency satellite device. I put my phone into SOS mode as soon as I could. I can't believe how many people came together to help and do whatever they possibly could with their abilities and the equipment that they had to help.
So the area near Bow Glacier Falls is still closed. Officials just aren't sure how stable it is, and they want to be certain it's safe before they move to reopen it.
Now, Helen, you mentioned that officials called this unpreventable, but they also called it remarkable, didn't they?
Yeah, so in the Rockies, we do see rockfall, but it's kind of the exceptional part of this is the amount of rockfall. The slab that fell off is just so large that officials theorize there could have been some sort of crack behind it.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Helen Pike in Banff National Park tonight. Rockfalls in a mountainous place like Banff National Park may not be uncommon, but Thursday's terrible incident raises urgent questions about how they happen and what steps might help to prepare for them. Lindsay Duncombe looks at that part of the story.
Mountains may look solid, unchanging, but these layers of rock are often moving.
Rocks, like anything else, when they get hot, they'll expand, and when they get cool, they contract. So over day and night, these rocks are in motion.
Over time, those changes in temperature create cracks, and eventually, with gravity, the rock can give way. When that happens at a very steep slope, it's called a rockfall.
At the base of the slope, you're just peppered with these blocks of different sizes, and they're traveling at about the speed at which a car would travel.
This geologist says the Bow Glacier Falls Trail was especially vulnerable because the slope used to be covered in ice, but the glacier is melting. He calculates this was the frozen area about 100 years ago, and this is the area now.
And this is a phenomenon we're seeing globally.
In fact, a retreating glacier in Switzerland is believed to have triggered this landslide last month. The entire village, home to 300 people, flattened. In that case, geologists anticipated the crisis and evacuated the town. Predicting what may happen on remote hiking trails, though, is tough.
The best thing to do to try to prevent them is at the beginning of the tourist season is to have professional climbers actually go up those rock faces and check those cracks and see what areas might be weak.
Technology could help too, especially something called INSAR. It uses satellites to measure the Earth's surface to the millimeter and could detect movements before a slide is triggered.
We'll be able to pick out those needles in a haystack in areas where landslides and people kind of come together.
A tool for preventing another tragedy as the planet changes and the risks grow. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Environment Canada is investigating 8 possible tornadoes in Saskatchewan. Storms battered the southeast of the province on Thursday. Tornado warnings were in effect for 24 communities. Meteorologists say that many storms in one day would be quite rare if confirmed. In the Middle East tonight, missiles from Israel and Iran continue to streak through the skies as the push by diplomats to stop a spiraling war appears to be going nowhere fast. Warnings from world leaders were more urgent than ever, but talks between European negotiators and Iran on its nuclear program produced only an agreement to keep talking. And as Chris Reyes shows us now, Donald Trump says the key to either peace with or victory against Iran is the U.S. alone.
Against dire warnings from leaders around the world, Iran and Israel strike at each other again. Iranian missiles penetrating Israeli defense systems, in one case hitting the port city of Haifa, injuring more than a dozen people according to local hospitals. Israel launched its own attacks on dozens of targets in Iran. All while diplomats scrambled to resuscitate talks on Iran's nuclear program, halted by war. In Europe, foreign ministers from France, Germany, and the UK and the EU met with Iran's foreign minister.
This is a perilous moment, and it is hugely important that we don't see regional escalation of this conflict.
No breakthrough in this latest round of mediation. Iran making it clear it will talk, but on one condition.
Once aggression is stopped and the aggressor is held accountable for the crimes committed.
The Security Council.
At a UN Security Council meeting requested by Iran, no consensus on who to hold accountable for the conflict, only a desperate call for dialogue.
The expansion of this conflict could ignite a fire that no one can control. We must not let that happen.
UN ambassadors from Israel and Iran vowed to keep fighting, all while accusing the other of causing instability in the region.
Iran has never initiated any war, while Israel, as an occupying and terrorist regime, has a long and dark history of illegal use of force.
How dare you ask the international community to protect you from the consequences of your own genocidal agenda?
President Donald Trump said he'd give no more than 2 weeks for diplomacy to work and that the U.S. needs to be at the table.
Iran doesn't want to speak to Europe. They want to speak to us. Europe is not going to be able to help in this.
Trump also said he still believes Iran was weeks or months from developing a nuclear weapon, despite reports from U.S. intelligence saying otherwise.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong.
Trump, by the way, also said that his own intelligence director, Tulsi Gabbard, is wrong on the intelligence. She testified before Congress just last March that Iran wasn't developing a nuclear weapon.
And Chris, you and other reporters questioned the Israeli ambassador to the UN about this as well.
Yes, we did. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon. He didn't share details, Erica, but insisted that their intelligence shows that Iran's nuclear program is military, not civilian. And he also called Iran masters of deception. He said that his government has no faith in negotiations until they see results, such as a clear and transparent dismantling of Iran's nuclear capabilities.
All right, thanks for this. Chris Reyes in New York. Israel's prime minister says its wars against Hamas, Hezbollah, and now Iran itself are remaking the Middle East. But as Margaret Evans shows us, some who've already sacrificed so much feel forgotten.
Sound and fury raging across Middle Eastern skies. Israel's war with Iran, masking that of another war. The one in Gaza, that's killed more than 55,000 Palestinians, according to health officials there, and where Israeli hostages are still held, 53 of them, many believed to be dead. In Jerusalem, a small neighborhood group still reads out their names every week. Nimrod Cohen, they say, moving through the list.
This was found.
Cohen's mother, Vicky, still has the Rubik's Cube her son used to carry everywhere, found in the tank he was taken from in Israel by Hamas fighters on October 7th. Vicky Cohen is a fixture of determination at demonstrations and marches, pushing her government to agree to a hostage deal with Hamas.
And now all the focus is to the war in Iran.
Cohen supports Israel's action against Iran, but not now, not before bringing the hostages home.
I can tell you for sure that the war in Gaza needed to stop a long time ago.
Some Israelis argue a decisive victory by Israel over Iran will force Hamas to agree to Israeli terms. This veteran hostage negotiator disagrees.
A weakening of Iran by Israel is not going to force Hamas to change its basic fundamental goal, which is to end the war. They are not going to surrender.
He says the Iran war means more exhaustion for the entire region.
Much more in Gaza, where if you ask a Gazan, what is your political dream, one state, two state, what else, they'll tell me, my dream is to have a bottle of water. And the Israeli people just want quiet.
It's not something Vicky Cohen expects or wants until her son is home. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
As the war between Israel and Iran continues, could Iran carry out its threat to cut off a global oil shipping route off its coast? We'll break down the potential global implications in about 25 minutes from now. The House of Commons has now risen for a summer break, but not before the Liberal government managed to pass a major piece of legislation. But as Evan Dyer shows us, it was not without controversy.
Questions and comments?
As Parliament wound down, the Liberals checked off their achievements.
Government fully funded, the supply bills are passed off to the Senate. Check. Defense spending, 2% of GDP. Check.
But there was still one major item outstanding.
To join us, the bill to build Canada strong.
Bill C-5 aimed at reducing interprovincial trade barriers and speeding approvals for major projects. It passed without full support from the Bloc Québécois or the NDP.
The Liberals and Conservatives have joined together to ram through Bill C-5 with shockingly little public input or debate. It gives the Prime Minister what has been called Henry VIII powers to override government laws by decree.
The Conservatives and the Bloc succeeded in limiting those powers, listing laws that the PM won't be able to override, including the Indian Act. But the Assembly of First Nations still has concerns about a lack of consultation.
First Nations are united, and they're united against, wanting to
You know, they want prosperity, but they don't want it at the expense of our rights.
With the Liberals claiming victories, Conservatives said not so fast.
The Prime Minister's 4 weeks in Parliament were filled with broken Liberal promises.
But the Conservatives helped Carney keep one promise, the passage of a law to open the way to big nation-building projects.
For far too long, when federal agencies have examined a new project, their immediate question has been why. Now, they will instead ask themselves, how?
Carney says he won't try to railroad projects through against Indigenous opposition and has planned a series of summits with Indigenous and Métis groups through the summer. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's a tough summer for job seekers, especially young ones. Postings are down and youth unemployment is up. Georgie Smythe now on what's driving the slowdown.
Highlight sort of this section and turn it.
Show Ritco is getting some help tinkering with their resume, restructuring it, adding certificates, anything that might help them stand out in a very tight jobs market.
It's hard. It's hard. I have a spreadsheet of all the jobs that I applied to within like a 2-month period, and it was over 80, and I only heard back from 2 of those, and they were both gig jobs, so nothing stable.
Just a few years ago, Canada had a shortage of workers, but now hiring is down. Many economists blame the trade war for fueling uncertainty and say employers are reluctant to bring on new staff. Canada's unemployment rate for 15 to 24-year-olds is more than 14%. That's 1.4% higher than last year and double the national average.
Type in what you want, like part-time, full-time, and then where you're from.
While the job search might be smoother now with the help of online platforms, economists say it hasn't been this slow for young people since 2012.
A lot of people without experience are having difficulties entering into entry-level positions because there's people who have more experience who are trying to apply for those jobs as well.
Employment agencies say there's more competition for summer jobs and casual work, ones teens or young adults often fill.
It's just like getting the first job that's so hard. I've tried to apply for jobs for like a year now, and just like most places like don't get back to me, or they just like say no.
Just a real trying time for Canadians under 25, especially in their teenage years.
And he says it'll continue to be hard as long as the trade war drags on.
Getting the ship turned around for job seekers is just going to require a turnaround in the overall economic situation, which can happen quickly, but we need things to actually change on the ground.
A frustrating start to working life before it's even begun. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
DHL Express Canada has now suspended operations across Canada. Thousands of daily deliveries have now ground to a halt.
One day longer, one day stronger.
A lockout and strike affecting more than 2,000 Unifor workers first brought them to the picket lines nearly 2 weeks ago. But it's only now that DHL is stopping deliveries as new federal legislation barring the use of replacement workers kicks in. A federal appeals court has granted a stay that pauses the cull of nearly 400 ostriches on a BC farm. The owners of the farm have been fighting an order from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to cull their flock after an avian flu outbreak last year. That order is now on pause pending an appeal. The owners' defiance has drawn international attention and a $20,000 fine. It's now been a decade since Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission called for change in the healthcare system.
There's been positive things done across the country in different jurisdictions.
The ongoing response and the long road ahead, next. In a time of turmoil, the resurgence of protest music.
Music is a beautiful, powerful thing.
And later, attracting grizzly bears with the power of song. A proud moment for these young drummers. We're back in 2. Former Toronto Raptors head coach Nick Nurse received an honorary degree from York University. He led the team to win the NBA championship in 2019. Here's some of his advice for the class of 2025.
Read 12 books a year. That's like one a month, right?
but I decided I'd cut everything down to 6. Okay, 6 books a year, go to 6 movies in a theater a year, go to 6 live concerts. So I cut it down to 6, just kind of in honor of Toronto and the 6 instead of 12.
Nurse even passed around his championship ring to the group of some 500 graduates. Tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day, a time to celebrate cultures and traditions, but also to recognize the push for truth and reconciliation. Alison Northcott looks at the gaps that remain in healthcare.
In this office is our physiotherapy.
Shirley P. and Barubay helps Indigenous patients access care. This Indigenous health center is a big part of that.
We have diabetic foot care clinic, we have optometry clinic, clinical psychologist, addictions worker, we have a spiritual healer. It's Inuit, but it's...
Services are available in several languages, including Inuktitut and Cree.
The clients can come and smudge anytime they want.
In just a year and a half, the patient base has grown from 150 to more than 600.
We love seeing it more busy because we can see, okay, people start really to trusting us.
10 years ago, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission pointed to troubling gaps in health outcomes between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. 7 of its 94 calls to action focused on health, including funding for existing and new Aboriginal healing centres and to recognize the value of Aboriginal healing practices.
There were gaps in the health system to really understand the need of the Indigenous people.
This family violence prevention coordinator says the clinic aims to overcome mistrust because the healthcare system has harmed many Indigenous people, including her.
Because I'm diabetic and I was explaining that I'm not feeling well, and all what I explained, she just told me, when people like you feel confused and all that, that's because you're drinking. I couldn't believe it.
According to the site Indigenous Watchdog, while some of the health calls to action are in progress, others have stalled and none are complete.
There's been positive things done across the country in different jurisdictions where they're providing funding to try and alleviate some of the issues. Just that what they're doing isn't enough.
Access is a major issue. Once this Addictions and Trauma Treatment Center is complete, people in Nunavut can receive culturally based care without traveling south.
I'm hopeful that once this is up and running, that we have an opportunity to look at being able to build centers in each of Nunavut's regions.
But she says the needs go beyond that too, and there's still work to do. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
In a time of civil unrest and demonstrations in the streets, some are turning to song to make a stand.
Raise up, boy, I dare y'all to burn my flag.
Protest music makes a resurgence. Plus, it's been a target for Ukrainians since the beginning of the war. The bridge joining Russia and Crimea.
Kerch Bridge is not supposed to be there. It's a valid military target.
How the familiar flashpoint is now straining relations between Moscow and Berlin. And also, appearing outmatched in a regional war, there are fears Iran may target the world's oil supply in retaliation.
Just the threat alone has been enough to increase the price at the pump.
The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next.
Love you too, buddy.
American singer Chris Brown pleaded not guilty in a London court today. He's charged with attempting to inflict grievous bodily harm. He's accused of attacking a music producer with a bottle in a nightclub 2 years ago. Prosecutors argue the attack was unprovoked. The trial is set to begin in October. The recent No Kings demonstrations in the U.S. against Donald Trump's policies are inspiring a protest music resurgence. As Ali Chiasson reports, the anthems are both old and new and across the political spectrum.
The No Kings protests saw thousands of people making their voices heard through song.
Do you hear the people sing?
In a tumultuous moment in history, protest music is experiencing a resurgence on the streets and on social media. And it isn't just kumbaya. Grandson's music is protest music. He rages against the machine of today.
Something like this No Kings movement, that is no one person is bigger than our country.
No kings, mother.
It also inspired new dubstep drops and country ditties.
There are no kings in America.
As with any protest, there's often a counter-protest, and that's playing out through song, too.
Raise up, boy, I dare y'all to burn my flag. The notion of like a real America, right? Which of course many of us would dispute.
Say you want a revolution.
Oldies are popular rally cries on the right, but sometimes they get misinterpreted. Born in the USA, for example, which is about a disillusioned Vietnam War veteran.
Reagan was using it as a patriotic anthem.
And so was Trump, until
A corrupt, incompetent, and treasonous administration.
there's no misinterpreting this. That band playing Bella Ciao.
Bella Ciao is a song that is strongly linked with the Italian anti-fascist partisan movement. Concretizing that idea in your mind helps you to maybe do something that would actually, advocate for change.
Music is a beautiful, powerful thing.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to break down the stories shaping our world. A week into the Israel-Iran conflict, Tehran has mused about cutting off the Strait of Hormuz, a critical oil artery.
Everything will stop and people will panic.
What Iran could do to create chaos in the world economy. But first, Germany's talk about providing long-range missiles to Ukraine sparked hope in Kyiv and furious warnings in Moscow.
They have been threatening the world with the Third World War, and they have been saying it about everything.
Terence McKenna breaks down what the powerful Taurus missiles are capable of and how Ukraine already has a possible target in mind.
This month, a familiar flashpoint re-emerged as the focus of the Russia-Ukraine war. The imposing 13-mile bridge between Russia and the occupied Ukrainian territory of Crimea stands as both a strategic and symbolic target for Ukraine. On June 3rd, the Ukrainians claimed that they had secretly attached a ton of explosives to one of the pillars of the bridge under the surface. The attack was overseen by the head of the Ukrainian SBU security service, General Vasyl Malyuk, who said the bridge was an absolutely legitimate target, especially considering the enemy used it as a logistical artery to supply its troops. Kira Rudik is a Ukrainian member of parliament.
Crimea is Ukraine. Kerch Bridge is not supposed to be there. It's a valid military target. And for us, of course, it's a reminder that Crimea is Ukraine, and we will not give up on it and on people who are remaining there.
This was not the first Ukrainian attempt to attack the bridge. The first came in 2022 when they exploded a truck bomb on the bridge that was so powerful it set a nearby train on fire and stopped traffic for several weeks. The next attack came in 2023 when the Ukrainians used their speedy sea drones to attack the pillars of the heavily defended bridge.
Yes.
They documented their attack in a video released by the Ukrainian security service.
Yes!
The Ukrainian drone pilots were ecstatic that they were able to take out one lane of the bridge, but again the Russians were able to repair it. The bridge is such an important target because it stands as the most powerful symbol of the success of Russian President Putin's campaign to seize Ukrainian territory. He proudly inaugurated the bridge after it was built in 2018, and he has had himself filmed numerous times as he personally drove over it, in a truck, in a car, and in a train. Now the bridge has apparently also become a target for one of Mr. Putin's powerful new enemies. The new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, gave Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a hero's welcome in Berlin a few weeks ago and promised to provide Ukraine with long-range missiles and weapons to be used against Russia.
Es wird hierbei keine Reichweitenbeschränkungen geben. Die Ukraine kann sich damit vollumfänglich verteidigen, auch gegen militärische Ziele außerhalb des eigenen Staatsgebiets.
In a remarkable interview on the ARD network, Chancellor Merz also spelled out what he considered a good target for German and Ukrainian missiles. Once again, the Kerch Bridge.
Die wichtigste Landverbindung zwischen Russland und der Krim zerstört wird. Auf der Krim, wo der größte Teil des militärischen Nachschubs für die russische Armee liegt, das wäre eine Möglichkeit, dieses Land nun endlich mal strategisch auch noch mal im Begriff zu bleiben, vor die Lage zu bringen.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov lashed back at Merz shortly after the Zelensky visit.
Германия сползает по той же наклонной плоскости, по которой она пару раз в прошлом веке уже двигалась вниз к своему краху. Надеюсь, что ответственные политики в этой стране все-таки сделают правильный вывод и остановят безумие.
Key to this discussion is the Taurus, a German-Swedish cruise missile that has a range of 500 kilometers and is more powerful than any Western missile that has been provided to Ukraine up to now. Taurus missiles fly low to evade radar and use GPS, satellite imaging, as well as artificial intelligence-enabled infrared cameras to observe the terrain and navigate to a target without contact with an operator. The Germans have already developed detailed plans for how they could help the Ukrainians use the Taurus to knock out the Kerch Bridge. The details came in the leak of a secret telephone call last year involving General Ingar Gerhards, the head of the German Air Force.
Ja, schönen guten Tag zusammen. Gerhards hier, soweit ich...
Gerhards was discussing with his senior officers the possible delivery of Taurus missiles to Ukraine and the Ukrainians' desire to use them to destroy the Kerch Bridge.
Wir alle wissen ja, dass sie die Brücke rausnehmen wollen. Das ist klar, wissen wir auch, was das am Ende bedeutet. Dann ist die Versorgung dieser so wichtig, nicht nur militärisch, strategisch wichtig, auch so ein bisschen, man muss ja auch... Ja.
Ich gerne noch mal schnell ergänzen wegen der Brücke, weil wir die uns intensiv angeguckt haben. Und die Brücke ist leider aufgrund ihrer Größe wie ein Flugplatz. Das heißt, es kann durchaus sein, dass ich dafür 10 oder 20 Flugkörper brauche.
The German officers suggest that the German Defense Minister, Boris Pistorius, was in favor of the Taurus missile deployment, but that then Chancellor Olaf Scholz was against it.
Sondern dass nochmal Pistorius gesehen hat durch diese ganze Diskussion, die da immer und immer wieder kommt. Und die kommt natürlich, weil keiner so richtig weiß, warum blockt der Kanzler hier.
Теперь новость, которая пришла незадолго до нашего выпуска.
The telephone call became public because it was recorded by Russian intelligence through a security breach and released on the airwaves of Kremlin propaganda channels. The editor-in-chief of the Russia Today channel is Margarita Simonyan.
Без их разрешения, не ставя никого в известность, по сути, Третью мировую войну. Поразительно, что главный вопрос, который их волнует в связи с этим, это не вопрос о том, как они будут за это отвечать. Это не вопрос о том, как ответит Россия, что она разбомбит в ответ в Германии, и чем это вообще закончится, и чем закончилось в прошлый раз, когда Германия бомбила наши мосты.
Hans von der Burhardt is the Berlin correspondent for Politico Europe.
It's a laughable argument. It's very clear that Germany is not only a democracy, but also that Russia is the aggressor here, that this whole military support for Ukraine is only about allowing Ukraine to defend itself.
Still, after the phone call release, Germany's then Social Democratic Chancellor Olaf Scholz immediately beat a retreat and said that Germany had no plans to provide Taurus missiles to Ukraine.
So Scholz was always playing with this image of being the peace chancellor who will ensure peace. But he was also, especially when it comes to Taurus, he was very much concerned about potential Russian escalation. Merz is really driven by, okay, how do we solve this conflict? What does Ukraine really need now? Show strength to Putin.
Before he became chancellor, Friedrich Merz said he saw no reason Germany should withhold the Taurus missiles, a statement that especially aggravated the Russians. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin pointed directly to the Taurus missile.
Невозможно применять Таурусы без немецких офицеров. Только немецкие офицеры смогут управлять Таурусами. А что же это такое, как не втягивание Федеративной Республики в прямой вооруженный конфликт с Российской Федерацией? Будут Таурусы или не будут, бессмысленно абсолютно.
Over the last year, there has been a steady drumbeat of threats to attack Germany on Russian propaganda channels.
И они в ужасе от этого. Если у нас есть это видео, покажите, пожалуйста.
Host Vladimir Solovyov showed video of massive damage inflicted on Ukraine cities by Russian bombing.
Вы понимаете, что так будут выглядеть города Германии? Только к ним мы будем гораздо жестче. Мы просто все снесем.
MP Kira Rudek says Russian threats are not believable.
Let's look at Russia's position since the day one, when they were constantly saying, if something like this would happen, then we will remove all the red lines. They have been threatening the world with the Third World War, and they have been saying it about everything. Again, you should be looking at what Russia does.
On a recent visit to Ukraine, Defense Minister Boris Pistorius promised $2.2 billion worth of aid. But in the face of Russian threats, he said Germany had no plan to deliver the Taurus missile now.
Meine Antwort nein.
In its much-heralded long-range drone raid on Russian bombers on June 1st, Ukraine announced that it had destroyed 37 aircraft. But post-raid satellite photos of the air bases showed that only 12 Russian aircraft were actually destroyed. No Russians died in the attack. Meanwhile, Russia is attacking Ukraine with up to 500 explosive drones every night. And dozens of Ukrainian civilians have died in recent weeks. There is a strong imbalance in the cost of war to the two sides, but still Ukrainians say they do not want to answer by attacking Russian civilians.
We are not terrorists. This is very simple. We are not terrorists. And from whatever operations Ukraine is conducting, we know that killing civilians is not our purpose or not our intention at all. We want them to leave us alone. We want them to go away. And this is the main goal.
Having been pressured to back off his proposal to supply Taurus missiles, Chancellor Merz says Germany's future military contributions to Ukraine will be kept secret.
As Terence mentioned, Germany's Taurus missiles are off the table for now, but last month Berlin offered to help Kyiv build its own long-range weapons. Under attack and seemingly outgunned, Tehran may have another powerful tool in its arsenal.
Iran has the means to attack a golden target, the Strait of Hormuz.
How a targeted retaliation by Iran could devastate the world's economy. That's next. As the Israel-Iran war continues, a global oil supply channel is now a focal point. Why shutting down the Strait of Hormuz could be a retaliatory tactic for Iran.
They can do things that can have an impact, but these things are suicidal for the regime.
David Common looks at how Iran could trigger economic chaos worldwide.
Iran appears outmatched when it comes to stopping Israeli airstrikes and would certainly be should the Americans join with a stealth bombing campaign. But Tehran can still create global chaos just off its mainland. Iran has the means to attack a golden target, the Strait of Hormuz. It is among the most strategically vital choke points in the world. 20% of the world's oil passes through this narrow body of water in slow-moving tankers. And Iran's naval forces, a combination of large and small vessels, have so far been largely untouched by the attacks. They could hit tankers with missiles or their very large supply of Shahed drones, causing massive fires and fear, effectively shutting down the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial traffic. The Iranians could go further by deploying explosive sea mines on the surface of the strait in a matter of hours, and it could take months or more to clear them, making the waterway impassable. Either action would cause global oil prices to spike. Just the threat alone has been enough to increase the price at the pump. It's why the Americans have poured their own naval ships into the region, and why any involvement by the U.S. military could get much more complicated, entangling them in a longer conflict. Iran could also attack the oil loading infrastructure at the ports of U.S. allies Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, south of the Strait of Hormuz, right here, is another choke point between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, through which 15% of all global commerce travels. Attacks by Iran's proxies, Yemen's Houthis, have already shown incredible skill at what's called sea denial, forcing commercial ships to avoid the area and use costly alternative routes. The U.S. Navy and Air Force have pounded the Houthis for more than a year, but they remain a functional force and would likely go all out should the Americans directly engage Iran. If that happens, if global trade becomes that threatened, it may well draw in other nations, even NATO. Iran knows this, as it too now weighs the risks of escalation.
While Donald Trump contemplates U.S. involvement in the war, they are moving more naval assets to the region. Here's another story we're working on. 40 years after the Air India bombing, a CBC News documentary looks at the tragedy and the fallout of Flight 182, the deadliest terrorist attack in Canadian history. Here's a preview.
It is the worst ever air crash at sea.
This was Canada's 9/11.
The Air India crash may be connected with an explosion at Tokyo's Narita airport.
If you give us your money, we will make Indian planes fall from the sky. That's a quote.
Warning signs were there, and the warning signs were mixed. These mysterious people that had been visiting Vancouver.
Why was that not evidence?
Everything that could go wrong went wrong with that flight. Air India was the first act of terrorism of its kind in the world.
In my opinion, this should have gone to a jury rather than a judge.
This is really a Canadian tragedy. My sisters were on that flight.
Lost my wife, lost my daughter, lost everything.
All those hopes and dreams just gone.
You can watch the full documentary, Two Suitcases, Anatomy of the Air India Bombing, this Sunday at 8 p.m. on CBC, or catch it now wherever you stream CBC. Up next, Squamish Nation kids put on a show for the wild.
When they started singing, the bears slowly started making their way to us.
Their powerful performance summons grizzly bears in our moment. These are the Proud Little Warriors, a group of Squamish Nation musicians, pictured here after a performance for an unusual crowd. These warriors sang the Grizzly Bear song at Grouse Mountain in BC, catching the attention of real grizzly bears. Tonight, their epic performance is our moment.
We were done a performance in Grouse, and then we went to go see the bears, and we had an idea of singing the Grizzly Bear song.
They were kind of practicing lightly, playing the drum, and as they were doing that, the bear popped his head up. So when they started singing, the bears slowly started making their way to us.
It was pretty cool, and it was super exciting.
And then all of a sudden there was a huge crowd behind, and people were asking them to sing another song.
Yeah, tell them to do it again before they leave. They were really bringing the bears here.
I think the crowd was just amazed by when they came up, the bears came over.
Everybody's telling them how proud they are, that they're carrying the culture and the songs and the language.
Every time I sing a song, I feel connected to our ancestors.
It was very heartwarming.
And the boys said they weren't nervous. They believe these bears were their ancestors coming over to listen to them carry out their traditions. They apparently ended up playing 3 songs, and they kept the bears intrigued. When they stopped playing, the bears retreated. Saturday is National Indigenous Peoples Day. You can find special content wherever you get CBC. From all of us here at the National, thank you for being with us. I'm Erica Johnson in Vancouver. Take care.